Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're a diagnostic technician staring down a bay full of modern vehicles, you already know that the days of just tracing a single hot wire to a dead bulb are completely long gone. Today, we're basically going to act as your enthusiastic field guide to demystify these complex vehicle communication networks. We're going to decode the invisible conversations happening under the hood right now so you can confidently wrench, troubleshoot, and absolutely master automotive diagnostics. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start by exploring the vehicle nervous system, then we'll break down the CAN bus OSI layers, move into diagnostics and network traffic, tackle troubleshooting failures, and finally, we'll wrap it all up by comparing the LIN bus versus the CAN bus. So, to really understand why these networks even exist in the first place, we have to look at the sheer, mind-boggling complexity of modern vehicles and motorcycles. I mean, a modern vehicle can easily have 70 or more electronic control units, or ECUs. We're talking about individual computers managing literally everything, from your engine timing all the way down to the anti-lock brakes. And think about modern motorcycles, right? Space is incredibly tight. If we used old-school point-to-point analog wiring to connect every single sensor to every single ECU that needed its data, the wiring harness would literally be the size of a tree trunk. It's just physically impossible. And that wiring nightmare? That is exactly why the CAN bus, which stands for Controller Area Network, was invented by Bosch back in the 1980s. You can think of CAN as the vehicle's central nervous system. It's this highly efficient, broadcast-based protocol. So instead of using direct wires for everything, the ECUs share a common bus. And here's the kicker. There is absolutely no central host computer acting as a traffic cop. Any ECU can broadcast a message, and all the other ECUs just listen in and decide if they actually need that specific information. Now, there are some massive benefits to running a system like this for both the manufacturers and for you, the technician. First off, it drops vehicle weight significantly. I mean, replacing thick copper bundles with a single network saves up to 20 kilograms. That's a huge boost for fuel efficiency. Second, it gives you a centralized point of entry for diagnostics, the good old OBD port. Third, it is incredibly robust against electrical noise. And finally, it ensures that critical safety messages always get priority on the network, no matter what. All right, let's get a little technical for a second. In terms of network architecture, CAN operates on the bottom two layers of the OSI model. You've got the data link layer that's defined by ISO 11898-1, and it handles all the digital stuff. You know, how messages are framed, how collisions get avoided, and how errors are tracked. But down in the trenches, right where you work, is the physical layer. That's ISO 1189-2. This layer dictates the actual physical wires. High-speed CAN uses two-wire differential signaling across the twisted pair. CAN high, which is typically a yellow wire, and CAN low, which is usually green. Let's break down what a single CAN message or frame actually looks like. It all kicks off with a start of frame bit. That's followed by the arbitration ID, which basically tells everyone on the bus exactly what the data is. Then you have the data length code, the actual physical data payload itself, and then a CRC checksum. That checksum is super important because it guarantees that, say, a spark plug firing nearby didn't corrupt the digital signal. Finally, there's an acknowledgement bit confirming at least one other ECU heard the message and an end of frame. But what happens when the engine ECU and the door module try to talk at the exact same time? Well, CAN uses something called non-destructive bitwise arbitration. Basically, it's a priority system based entirely on zeros and ones. A zero is a dominant bit. It actively drives voltage onto the bus. A 1 is recessive, so it's passive. If two nodes transmit simultaneously, the one with the lowest arbitration ID wins. Why? Because it has more dominant zeros at the start, so it literally overpowers the other signal. The losing ECU realizes it was overpowered, instantly stops talking without destroying the winning message, and just waits its turn. Pretty clever, right? So we know how the raw bits flow, but how do we actually ask the car what's wrong? This is where higher layer protocols step in. Things like OBD2 or UDS, which stands for Unified Diagnostic Services. When you plug in your scan tool, it uses the CAN bus to send service identifiers, or SIDs. It uses those to request specific data identifiers, or DIDs. It's basically your tool tapping the network on the shoulder and asking, hey, engine ECU, what's your current coolant temperature DID? And the ECU packages that answer into a CAN frame and fires it right back. To actually intercept and read all this network traffic, technicians rely on some very specific hardware. You've got standard OBD2 adapters for passenger cars and J1993 9-pin adapters for heavy-duty trucks and tractors.
If you're really digging deep, protocol analyzers decode the raw hex data for you, while oscilloscopes let you view the actual physical voltage waves bouncing across those yellow and green wires. And this right here is exactly how we extract those diagnostic trouble codes, or DTCs, that ECUs throw when they detect a fault. But here is a massive question, a real pivot point for any diagnostic tech. What happens when the network itself is the problem? How do you know when the bus actually fails, rather than just a single random sensor acting up? Well, every CAN controller has this brilliant built-in self-preservation mechanism. Inside every single node are two counters, a transmit error counter and a receive error counter. If an ECU starts transmitting garbage data, its counter goes up. If it passes 127 errors, it enters a state called error passive. It actually loses its ability to actively flag errors on the bus. And if it hits 255 errors, it goes into a bus-off state. The failing ECU literally unplugs itself from the digital network so it doesn't drag the entire vehicle down with it. So what actually causes those error counters to spike in the first place? Usually, it's physical wire damage right there in the bay. The most common physical bus faults you're going to be hunting down are things like missing termination resistors, a CAN wire shorted directly to the vehicle's chassis ground, a CAN wire shorted to the 12-volt supply, or, and this happens a lot, the twisted pair, CAN high and CAN low, get chafed and shorted directly to each other. When you suspect a physical fault, your trusty multimeter is going to be your best friend. Step 1, absolutely always disconnect the vehicle's battery so active traffic doesn't skew your readings. Step 2, check the resistance across CAN high and CAN low. You should see about 60 ohms. Why? Because there are two 120 ohm resistors at opposite ends of the bus, wired in parallel. If you see 120 ohms, you know one resistor or wire is broken. Next, steps 3 and 4. Test both pins for continuity to ground, and then to the power supply. A dedicated CAN debugger tool can obviously do this in seconds, but honestly, your multimeter is an incredibly solid fallback. All right, let's shift gears a bit and see how this all fits into the broader vehicle architecture. Enter the LIN bus. Look, CAN is amazing, but it requires 2 wires, precision timing, and relatively expensive microcontrollers. Frankly, it's total overkill for something like simply rolling down a passenger window or turning on a dome light. So the local Interconnect Network, or LIN, was designed specifically to take that low-level load off the main CAN bus. LIN is a much simpler, super cost-effective subnetwork. It uses just a single wire. It operates on a very strict master-slave architecture. Think of it like a manager and their workers. The master node strictly dictates all the timing. It sends out a sync break to grab everyone's attention, a quick sync byte, which is hex 55 to set the clock speed, and then a protected ID. The slave nodes use specific node addresses, and they never ever speak out of turn. They only respond with their data and a checksum when their specific ID is called by the master. So it all comes down to cost and complexity, and understanding why a manufacturer chooses one over the other. The CAN bus is multi-master, relies on 2 twisted wires, and is high-speed and incredibly robust. It is perfect for mission-critical stuff like engine timing and advanced driver assistance systems. The LIN bus, on the other hand, is master-slave, uses just 1 wire, and is slow and cheap. That makes it absolutely perfect for comfort features. Think adjusting your side mirrors or running the climate control fans. To really sum up the stakes of what we're dealing with here, I want to share a quote straight from our source material. If a system failure could compromise safety, the CAN bus is the appropriate choice. I think that really emphasizes the immense responsibility resting on your shoulders in the diagnostic bay. When a CAN network has a physical fault, it is not just a convenience issue. It's a safety-critical system that absolutely needs your expert attention to function perfectly. Well, we have covered a lot. The digital theory, the physical layer, error states, and even step-by-step multimeter diagnostics. You now know exactly what separates the high-speed CAN nervous system from those localized LIN subnetworks. So the only question I have left for you is, are you ready to take all this knowledge, pick up your tools, and confidently apply these protocols in the diagnostic bay tomorrow? Keep this information handy and go master those networks.